All right, so you've given us some fascinating excerpts from Dante's Inferno, along with some scholarly notes. Let's dive in and see what we can uncover.
Always a thrill to delve into the Inferno.
Oh, absolutely.
Not just for the vivid imagery and the gripping narrative, but for the way it continues to spark debate, centuries later.
Oh, absolutely. It's like he left us a puzzle box, and every generation tries to unlock its secrets. And we've got a mix here of poetry and academic commentary. So we're not just uncovering Dante's vision of hell, but we're also uncovering how scholars are making sense of it all these years later.
Precisely. It's like having a conversation across time,
Yeah.
engaging with Dante's ideas and the interpretations that have sprung from them.
So our mission,
Hmm.
if we choose to accept it, is to give you a solid grasp of the Inferno's structure. Dante's fascinating blend of classical and Christian ideas, and a taste of what keeps scholars debating even today.
A worthy challenge indeed.
Yeah.
Perhaps we should start by situating Dante himself,
Okay.
grounding this epic poem in the realities of his world.
Right, because Dante wasn't just some reclusive poet scribbling away in an ivory tower.
No.
This guy was deeply involved in the political turmoil of his time,
Absolutely.
which ultimately led to his exile from Florence.
Ah, yes. The infamous feud between the white Guelphs and the black Guelphs.
Yeah, and Dante.
Dante, a staunch white Guelph, found himself on the losing side of that power struggle. Forced to wander Italy while his beloved city remained out of reach.
Yeah, and this exile wasn't just a personal tragedy. It had a profound impact on his writing.
Mm-hmm.
Most of his major works, including the comedy, were written during this period of exile. It's almost as if he poured his frustration, his longing for Florence, into this incredible vision of hell.
Absolutely. You can sense the echoes of those political battles in the poem, the betrayals,
Yeah.
the power struggles. They're all there in the characters and the punishments that Dante depicts. But there's also something deeply personal in his portrayal of hell, as if he were confronting not just the sins of his city, but the demons within himself.
Okay, speaking of confronting demons, one thing that always strikes me about Dante is his decision to write the comedy in Italian. Most scholars at the time were writing in Latin,
Exactly.
so he made a choice.
Latin was the language of scholarship and the church, but Dante chose to write in the vernacular, the language of the people. It was a
lovely.
bold move. Some might even say a revolutionary one.
So why do you think he did it? Was he just trying to be a rebel?
Well, there's certainly an element of challenging the status quo,
Uh-huh.
but I think it goes deeper than that. By writing in Italian, Dante made his work accessible to a wider audience.
Yeah.
He wanted everyone, not just the elite, to be able to experience his vision of hell, purgatory, and paradise.
So it's like he's democratizing
Yeah,
access to profound philosophical
right.
and theological ideas.
Right.
And that reminds me, the notes mention that he also wrote philosophical works,
Yeah.
like the Convivio.
Ugh, yes. The Convivio, or Banquet. Like the comedy, it was written in Italian, further demonstrating Dante's desire to engage with a broader audience. And although it remained unfinished, the Convivio offers a fascinating glimpse into Dante's wide-ranging intellectual interests. Covering everything from philosophy and language to astronomy and the structure of the cosmos.
So from exiled politician to poet to philosopher,
Mm.
all while challenging the linguistic norms of his time.
Yes.
As Dante was clearly a man who was not afraid to shake things up.
Indeed.
Okay, let's shift gears now and focus on the Inferno itself. It's one part of a three-part epic.
Correct.
Right.
The comedy, as he called it, is comprised of Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. It's a journey from the depths of hell back to God, reflecting the medieval idea of spiritual progression and the possibility of redemption.
Okay. And even the poetic structure itself reflects this divine order.
Yes.
Right. Tell me about that three-line rhyme scheme that he used.
Ah, yes, the terza rima. It's a remarkably intricate rhyme scheme, where the second line of each tercet rhymes with the first and third lines of the following tercet, creating this chain-like effect that pulls you through the poem. But it's not just a technical flourish, it's deeply symbolic.
Symbolic.
How so?
Well, some scholars believe that the three-line structure is meant to mirror the Holy Trinity,
Okay.
the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It suggests a universe governed by divine order, where even the structure of a poem can reflect the profound interconnectedness of all things.
So it's like he's saying that even in the depths of hell, God's presence, God's order can still be felt.
Mm.
And speaking of divine order, what about those classical figures that Dante includes?
Yes.
Like using Virgil as his guide.
Virgil, the author of the Aeneid, was a highly respected figure in Dante's time.
Yeah.
Choosing him as a guide through hell was a deliberate choice, one that speaks to Dante's desire to bridge the gap between classical learning and Christian beliefs. So it's not just about Virgil leading Dante through the physical landscape of hell,
Yeah.
but also about guiding him through these different intellectual and spiritual traditions.
Precisely. Virgil represents human reason, the wisdom of the ancients, leading Dante through the darkness towards a greater understanding of both himself and the divine.
Okay, this is where I'm really starting to see the depth of Dante's vision. Every detail, every choice seems to be layered with meaning. And speaking of layers, let's talk about this whole hell as a body concept.
Yes.
It's a fascinating idea, but how does it actually work?
It's one of the most striking and enduring aspects of Dante's Inferno. He envisioned hell not as some chaotic abyss, but as a structured realm, mirroring the human body from head to toe.
So the placement of a sin in the hell's body reflects the nature of that sin. That's pretty ingenious. But why go to such lengths to create this structure?
Dante wasn't just creating a vivid setting. He was making a profound statement about the nature of sin and its impact on both individuals and society. By linking sin to specific parts of the body, he's suggesting a kind of interconnectedness, implying that sin isn't just an abstract concept, it's something that corrupts us from the inside out.
So it's not just about punishment, but about understanding the deep-seated nature of sin. But how does that actually play out in the Inferno?
Well, for starters, Dante and Virgil journey downwards, descending through 9 circles, each representing a different category of sin.
So it's not just a physical descent, but a moral one as well. Like they're going deeper and deeper into the heart of human darkness.
Precisely. And as they descend, the sins become progressively worse, reflecting a descent into the darkest parts of the human soul.
And each sin is punished in a way that fits the crime.
Right.
This whole contrapasso concept is pretty fascinating.
Exactly. Dante believed that the sinners' punishments were a form of poetic justice, mirroring the nature of their transgressions and forcing them to confront the consequences of their actions.
So like the gluttons being forced to wallow in filth for eternity. It's not just punishment, it's like a reflection of their sin.
Exactly.
Right, so we've got this layered landscape of hell, carefully structured, populated with these incredibly vivid punishments. But now I'm curious about the people we encounter along the way.
Ah, yes, the inhabitants of Dante's hell. They are as diverse as the sins they represent, drawn from mythology, history, and even Dante's own personal life.
It's like he's giving us this guided tour of humanity's worst impulses. And he's chosen some. Pretty memorable. Tour guides.
Indeed.
Let's start with one that always gets to me. Francesca da Rimini.
Yes.
I mean,
Francesca.
Her story's just so heartbreaking.
Indeed. Francesca and her lover, Paolo, are forever caught in the second circle. Swept along by a relentless whirlwind, their punishment reflects their sin. Lust, the overpowering passion that consumed them in life.
It wasn't just any affair, right? It was a love triangle. Betrayal of trust and family ties.
Absolutely. And in their dialogue, Francesca reveals a deep understanding of love's power, even as she acknowledges the devastating consequences of her actions. It's a reminder that even the most passionate love can lead us astray, especially when it disregards societal norms and moral boundaries.
It's also a reminder that Dante was living in a world where love and marriage were often intertwined with politics and power. So Francesca's story is a tragedy on multiple levels, both personal and societal. Okay, what about a figure who represents those political entanglements more directly? The notes mentioned Farinata degli Uberti,
Yes.
who was a prominent political figure during Dante's time.
Farinata was a leader of the Ghibellines, the faction opposed to the Guelphs, to which Dante belonged. Even in hell, their political rivalry continues. Farinata is placed among the heretics, entombed in fiery graves, yet he still engages in these heated debates with Dante.
So it's like those earthly conflicts have followed them into the afterlife. Even the fires of hell can't extinguish those political passions. It makes me wonder if Dante is suggesting that these divisions, these hatreds, they're so deeply ingrained that they become a part of us, even in death.
It's certainly a thought-provoking interpretation. Dante doesn't shy away from portraying the complexities of his political world, even within the context of hell. It reminds us that the Inferno is not just an abstract exploration of sin, it's also a reflection of Dante's own lived experiences, his own struggles and allegiances.
Okay, now for a truly chilling figure, Ugolino della Gherardesca.
Ah, yes.
His story is horrifying and heartbreaking. A nobleman accused of treachery. He's imprisoned with his sons and grandsons. and left to starve to death.
And in Dante's hell, Ugolino is found in the ninth circle, frozen in ice, eternally gnawing on the skull.
His betrayer.
Archbishop Ruggieri. It's a scene of unimaginable suffering, but it's also a powerful commentary on the nature of betrayal and the destructive power of revenge.
It's one of those visceral images in the entire Inferno. You can almost feel the icy grip of despair and the consuming rage that drives Ugolino to this eternal act of cannibalistic revenge.
Correct.
It raises some uncomfortable questions about justice and punishment. Was Ugolino's sin so great that it warranted this eternal torment?
Right.
Was he driven to his actions by desperation, by a father's love for his sons? Dante doesn't provide any easy answers. Instead, he forces us to confront the complexities of human motivation and the blurred lines between victim and perpetrator.
Absolutely.
And speaking of blurred lines, we have to talk about Brother Alberigo,
Yes.
a friar who ends up in the ninth circle, alongside Ugolino. How does a man of the cloth end up in the deepest pit of hell?
Brother Alberigo's story is a chilling reminder that even those who profess piety can harbor unimaginable darkness within him. He committed a horrific act of violence, poisoning his guests at a dinner party. But what's even more shocking is that, according to Dante, Alberigo's soul was sent to hell while his body was still alive, on earth.
Wait, so his soul is condemned to hell while his body is still walking around?
Yes.
That's terrifying.
It is, and it speaks to the gravity of his sin in Dante's eyes. It suggests that some acts are so evil, so fundamentally opposed to God's will, that they warrant immediate damnation, regardless of the physical body's fate.
So it's like he's saying the true sin resides in the soul, not the body, and that even outward piety can't mask the darkness within. Okay, so we've got these historical figures, political rivals, even religious figures, populating Dante's hell. It's an incredible tapestry of human experience, all woven together by this intricate system of sin and punishment.
Indeed. And as we journey alongside Dante and Virgil, we're not just witnessing these punishments, we're also forced to confront our own assumptions about sin, justice, and the very nature of the human soul.
Right, because Dante doesn't just tell us what to think. He presents these complex scenarios, these flawed characters, and he invites us to grapple with the moral ambiguities, like the debate over Brunetto Latini's sin.
Yes, Brunetto Latini, Dante's beloved mentor. His placement in hell has sparked much debate among scholars. Dante condemns him for unnatural sins, which many interpret as homosexuality. But others argue that there's more to the story, that Dante's condemnation might be rooted in political or intellectual differences, rather than purely sexual ones.
So it's like he's inviting us to look beyond the surface, to consider the complexities of human relationships and the limitations of our own understanding.
Yes.
And speaking of limitations, I have to ask about this whole mortalism thing. The notes mention that Dante was influenced by ideas that contradicted Christian teachings. What's that all about?
Dante was a man of his time, deeply immersed in the intellectual currents of the 14th century. He was particularly fascinated by the works of Aristotle, who explored the idea of mortalism, the belief that the soul dies with the body. This, of course, directly challenged the Christian doctrine of the soul's immortality.
Yeah, so how did Dante reconcile these conflicting ideas? Was he, like, questioning his own faith?
It's a question that has puzzled scholars for centuries. While Dante was clearly drawn to certain aspects of Aristotelian philosophy, he ultimately affirmed the Christian belief in the immortality of the soul. He believed that true human nature involved the union of both body and soul, and that both would be reunited after death for final judgment.
So he found a way to integrate these different philosophical traditions, ultimately reaffirming his Christian beliefs.
Precisely. And this belief is reflected in the Inferno itself, where the damned souls experience suffering, not just in spirit, but also in a physical form. Their punishments are vividly described, emphasizing the interconnectedness of body and soul, even in the afterlife.
Which brings us back to that whole concept of contrapasso. It's not just about punishment. It's about the symbolic resonance between the sin and its consequences.
Exactly, and the physicality of those punishments, the visceral details Dante provides, reinforces the idea that sin has both spiritual and physical consequences. It's a stark warning to the reader, reminding us that our actions in this life have repercussions that extend beyond the grave.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about the structure of hell, the concept of contrapasso, and this fascinating array of characters that we encounter along the way. But I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, those strange verses. that has sparked so much debate among scholars. It sounds like a literary mystery.
Hmm.
What exactly makes those verses so strange?
The strange verses refer to a passage in Canto 9
Okay.
where Dante and Virgil are confronted by the Furies and the monstrous Medusa.
Okay.
It's a moment of heightened tension and drama, and Dante uses some unusual techniques to amplify the impact.
Okay, so we've got these terrifying mythological figures, the Furies and Medusa. What's so strange about how Dante describes them?
Well, for one thing, he interrupts the narrative flow
Okay.
to address the reader directly. It's as if he's stepping out of the poem to say, hey, pay attention here. This is important.
Well, that's a bold move. It's like breaking the fourth wall,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. It's a technique that was rarely used in epic poetry, and it creates this sense of immediacy, of being right there with Dante as he faces these terrifying figures. And then there's the language itself.
Okay.
Dante uses incredibly vivid and disturbing imagery to describe Medusa, creating a sense of visceral horror.
Can you give us an example? What kind of imagery?
He describes her hair as a nest of vipers,
Oh, wow.
her eyes as bloodshot and terrifying, and her breath as a pestilential wind. It's a truly grotesque and unsettling portrayal, meant to evoke this primal fear in the reader.
Okay, so it's not just the content of the verses that's strange. It's also the way Dante chooses to present them,
Right.
disrupting that narrative flow and using this intensely visceral language.
Yes.
But why do you think he did that? What was he trying to convey?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And that's precisely why these verses have fascinated scholars for centuries. Some argue that Medusa represents the dangers of succumbing to fear, while others see her as a symbol of temptation, or even the perversion of reason.
So even a figure like Medusa,
Yeah.
who seems relatively minor in the grand scheme of the Inferno,
Yeah.
can be interpreted in multiple ways, right? Adding to the complexity of the poem.
Absolutely. And it speaks to the richness of Dante's allegorical imagination. Every detail, every character can be read on multiple levels, inviting the reader to actively engage with the text and draw their own conclusions.
So it's a reminder that great literature isn't about passive consumption. It's about active participation.
Yes.
It's about grappling with difficult ideas and finding our own meaning within the text.
I couldn't agree more. And it's this active engagement, this wrestling with ambiguity, that keeps the Inferno relevant and thought-provoking, centuries after it was written.
Okay, so we've talked about the historical context, the structure, the characters, the punishments, these strange verses. We've covered a lot of ground. But we can't talk about the Inferno without addressing Dante's masterful use of symbolism. It seems like every element of the poem carries this deeper meaning.
Absolutely. Dante was a master of symbolism, using it to elevate the narrative beyond a mere recounting of events to a profound exploration of the human condition.
Can you give us some examples of the symbolism we see in the Inferno?
Well, one of the most prominent symbols is the journey itself. Dante's descent through hell represents not only a physical journey, but also a spiritual one. It's a journey of self-discovery, a descent into the darkest recesses of the human soul, where Dante confronts his own sins and weaknesses.
It's like a metaphor for the process of confronting our own inner demons, facing those aspects of ourselves that we'd rather keep hidden.
Precisely. And along this journey, Dante encounters a menagerie of terrifying creatures, the three beasts that block his path at the beginning, the monstrous ferryman Charon, the grotesque figure of Satan himself.
And these creatures aren't just there for shock value, are they? They each carry a symbolic weight,
Of course not.
like the three beasts,
Yep.
the leopard, the lion, and the she-wolf.
Exactly. These beasts represent the three main categories of sin: incontinence, violence, and fraud. And by placing them at the very start of Dante's journey, he suggests that sin is this fundamental part of the human experience, something we must all confront on our path to redemption.
So before Dante can even begin his descent into hell, he has to acknowledge these baser instincts within himself,
Yes.
these temptations. That can lead us astray.
That's a great way to put it. And then there's the symbolism of light and darkness. As Dante descends deeper into hell, the light gradually diminishes until they reach the ninth circle, where it's completely dark.
Right. I remember reading that in the excerpts, that description. And it's such a chilling image. It's like the deeper they go, the further they move from God's grace, from the light of hope and redemption.
Precisely. This darkness symbolizes the spiritual blindness that often accompanies sin. As Dante moves further from God, he is enveloped in darkness, both literally and figuratively. It's a powerful reminder that sin can lead us down a path of isolation and despair.
And even the punishments themselves, while fitting the crimes, in a very literal contrapasso sense, also seem to carry a deeper symbolic meaning.
Hmm.
Like the hypocrites we talked about earlier, forced to wear these heavy lead cloaks that are gilded on the outside.
That's a brilliant example. Their punishment is a perfect visual metaphor for the hypocrisy that Dante was criticizing in the church and society at large. They appear righteous and holy on the surface, but underneath they are burdened by the weight of their own deceit.
It's like he's saying that true righteousness isn't about outward appearances, it's about the state of your soul, the purity of your intentions.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of Dante's symbolism. It operates on multiple levels, inviting us to consider the moral and spiritual implications of every action, every choice.
So even those seemingly small details,
Mm-hmm.
like the description of a punishment
Mm.
or the appearance of a creature, can be loaded with symbolic meaning. Makes you realize that you could spend a lifetime unpacking all the layers of the Inferno.
Absolutely. And that's why it continues to fascinate and challenge readers. Centuries later, every generation finds new ways to interpret and apply Dante's vision, uncovering fresh layers of meaning and relevance.
It's a reminder that great art transcends time,
Mm.
and it continues to speak to us in profound ways long after its creator is gone.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Dante's Inferno. I have to say, it's been an incredible journey.
It has indeed. We've only scratched the surface, of course.
Yeah.
But hopefully you now have a deeper appreciation for the poem's vivid imagery, its intricate structure, and its enduring power.
Yeah, I think we've given our listener plenty to chew on, but I don't want to leave them hanging. What's one final thought you'd like to leave them with?
As you continue your exploration of the Inferno, consider this. Dante's vision of hell reflects not just medieval beliefs, but also timeless human anxieties about sin, justice, and the consequences of our actions. What resonates most strongly with you in this epic journey?